there could be potential federal, provincial funding. That'll change the whole look of this graph again. We're in the middle of we've started the development charge study that was approved by Council in July to move up a new development charge, to conduct a development charge study earlier. That may have some impact on the reserve and the reserve fund balances. So this all changes as we know more information. Once asset management plans are built into the capital plan and any for other studies or master plans, that all of those items can change the graph completely. This is at a point in time, and the way it looks now and how the proposed financing is at this point in time. Okay. This graph provides an overview of the status of the reserve and reserve funds over the next 10 years based on the proposed capital plan. It is based on when the approved projects in the capital plan are initiated and not when we actually pay for the project. This means that the project is budgeted, for example, in 2018, and we have the funds being removed from the reserve fund in the same year. But in practicality, that's not really what actually happens. The funds are actually removed from the reserve and reserve fund in future years down the road when the project is actually completed. Besides the timing of the completion of the projects, this graph will change, again, what I've just mentioned, based on the availability of infrastructure funding from federal and provincial governments, any results of asset management plans, master plans, and the development charge study. One thing I want to note is last year when you saw this graph, the top part above the year line here, the positive part, generally showed just rate water and sewer reserve funds in a positive balance. Based on our Council's approval of the recommendations in the July report for the reserves and reserve funds, you'll notice that the reserves for water and wastewater are declining, and then they start to go back up by the end of the year 2027. This was basically as a result of a recommendation that water and wastewater projects share in a percentage of the road reconstruction, and that was approved back in July. You'll notice now the levy-supported capital plans based on the recommendations, which included the change on how we fund infrastructure projects. It included the legacy interest, adding that to, committing that to the road reserve. It also committed some OSIF funding over the next 10 years to the road reserve. And it also included a recommendation for an increase in the number of contributions to various reserves and reserve funds on an annual basis. And as a result of that, you'll notice that in 2027, the lighter olive green color in the graph, we're now positive. Last year's graph at that time, everything was below for the levy capital reserve, capital replacement reserves. And again, this whole graph would shift to the right because projects are not actually funded based on when we budget for the project. They're funded based on when the project is actually completed. So that would move the graph to the right a little bit more. So we'll be probably more positive in 2027 than we're showing. That's the worst case scenario if everything was to be completed the way the plan was presented to you today. Okay, page 14, your next is the next graph actually is when we looked at the debt annual repayment, which is what we were talking about. Again, the olive green color is the available debt capacity that is available to fund capital projects. This is the amount of debt that we could be incurred without exceeding our annual repayment limit. What we need to keep foremost in our thinking is that the amount of excess debt capacity means that there's a lot of debt could be issued. However, in doing so, there would be an impact on the tax rates and the user rates because the debt payment and interest charges would be included in future operating and rate budgets. The next few slides I'll just go over quickly. We just wanted to mention again the volatility of the capital plan and reinforce that all these numbers, this is a point in time. This is based on the current proposed capital plan to council. Items that continue to affect how our graphs look and how our plan looks will be asset management plans, assessment studies, development charge studies, if newer federal funding is received, and when we come back to council, new financing policy or an updated financing policy may also change how all these graphs look and the state of the reserves and the reserve funds. The next chart is, I just included this just to remind council, these are the recommendations that we put forth in July that for the impact, for approximately 1.43 million. These were suggested or recommended increases to the levy. So the reserves, specifically the road reconstruction reserve and the solid waste reserve and the general capital replacement reserve, these are increased contributions to ensure that they're sustainable over the next 10 years.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luca. Through you to Finance. I thought we did away in the reserve report that we had. I thought we did away with the Delhi BIA Development Reserve. There was a balance in there, and shouldn't we just give it back to them and get out of that business?
Microphone, please. Sorry, Kathy.
Sorry. Through Mayor Luke to Councillor Height. The negative 5,000 is actually, we're making an annual contribution to the Delhi Business Development Reserve. We recommended that we no longer make that contribution to the reserve. Off the top of my head, I am not sure what the reserve balance is. Not sure if we ever talked about actually transferring the reserve back to the BIA. But they do have a balance in the reserve fund that they can use and through their board recommend how to spend the funds.
Right, like, I don't know why we're contributing to their reserve, because that obviously that's been in there for decades or who knows when. I think it was around $38,000 sitting there. Like, give it back to them, be done with it. Why are we babysitting?
Through the mayor, yes, that is definitely something that we will consider. We are administering the reserve for them, and we're not their bookkeepers. So, and that was I guess a grandfathered in to Norfolk County policy that we recommended to stop for that very reason. It's not fair. It's not equitable to the other BIA, and so that is one of the reasons why we stopped doing it.
Okay, like one of the points, I don't even know if they know that they have money sitting there waiting to be spent on some projects, like, and why aren't they doing something? All right, you wouldn't find that at the Simcoe BIA, I'm sure.
Through the mayor, they have been using it. They have been drawing down on it since I've started. They've I think used it for some decorative Christmas decorations, like big ones that you put on the light standards and everything like that. So they have been using it, and so they are well aware that it's there.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Mr. Mayor, I thought from listening to Councillor Columbus in the past that this $5,000 for the BIA was to be put in the reserve so eventually they could buy some property for parking. Am I correct or incorrect?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rhodes. When we went through transition, there was that was the purpose of the reserve, was to purchase a municipal parking lot. They have done so since then, and since that time they have requested to change the purpose of the reserve, which is more for business development and developing the downtown core area. And they do contribute $5,000. The BIA contributes $5,000 also on an annual basis.
Just to be clear for myself here, Kathy, on this page, what this page is telling me, and it's in your, certainly in, excuse me, in your report on tab 1, that if we pass this as presented, that means 1.14 million would be on the levy portion of our tax for budget for 2018, which would represent a 1.43% increase before we even start the operating, based on a budget of 81 million levy. Is that correct? So and I recognize that whatever we pass in the next day or two here would be subject to review in January, but that would make up at least 1.4% of any potential increase added on to operating.
That's
Yeah,
correct. That's
yeah.
an increase in addition to, on page 16, I've indicated many years ago, council approved a 2% annual increase on a number of different reserves.
Yes.
I think 4 or 5. This is in addition to those contributions.
This is in addition to those contributions.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. We never seem to have enough money to put into reserves. Okay, we'll move on to page 17 then, if you're ready, Kathy, and if anybody has any questions, let me know.
If I may, I'm going to hijack Kathy's presentation here a little bit. I think it's worth repeating these increased reserve contributions. If you look at your previous slides, the green area on the capital replacement, that's what this is related to, and that's one of our biggest challenges for financial sustainability, is replacing our existing assets using our reserves. One of the temperature checks that you can do is when you look at your financial statements, you have an annual amortization of your existing assets, and that's the depreciation of the assets over time, and that is approximately $21 to $22 million a year. Our reserve contributions are about $5 or $6 million short of that. So we still have work to do. However, if we could look at page 17, the 1.4% increase on the levy, it's part of, and why don't we look at the road construction reserve? That's obviously, if you look at the first column there, at the end of 10 years in our original plan, we had a $48 million deficit in that reserve. And in the July report, when we looked at our reserves and different avenues that we can use, there's a 5-step approach that Kathy's already mentioned, but I do think it's worth repeating. There's a 5-step approach that we are using to get from the 48 million to, in July, at that point in time, to a very small surplus. And now with our new plan, it's even a larger surplus in that reserve. And that's because we are going to go with a DC study ahead of the 5-year term, because we recognize there's some deficiencies there. We are changing the way we fund the roads projects by using the water and wastewater reserve, because there's pipes under those roads. We are using the legacy fund to contribute to that reserve, and we're also using the OSIF funding for that reserve as well. So this 5-step approach gets you these results. So I can't emphasize enough for council to keep that in mind when we are at the tax operating budget in January. This is a very good example. In order to get to that last column, to that surplus, there's 3 major things that we need to do. We either need to reduce costs, increase the contribution to the reserves, or we're left with debt. And I don't think we want the first or the last option. The first option, reduce costs, we all know we're in an infrastructure, we have an infrastructure issue. So, and when we start looking at asset management, that's going to change that picture, and I don't know what that picture looks like until we look into it. But this is a very good example at when we increase our contributions relatively, I don't want to use the word small because it is over $1 million, but it's relatively a small increase in our reserve contributions. That changes, if you look at the bottom line on page 17, that changes a $40 million deficit to a $4 million surplus because you plan it over the 10 years. So it's a very small change, has huge benefits 10 years down the road. So I just wanted to emphasize that for council, because that report that we did in July was a very, very good report. And I'm glad council.
You're saying there's a way to solve this, it's just going to take time, and so not be too painful if we do it over 10 years. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To our treasurer, you forgot option number 4, and that's growth. Spread the pain over the tax base. That's what we desperately need right now to bail us out sooner. But that's not my question. My question was back a few slides on page 14. I know that we're moving ahead with the DC charges study. And when I look over here, forward one, please. Yeah, right in here. So you have your DC debt and you have your debt repaid from your water and wastewater customers. Well, some of that I feel the development charges, basically, that's growth. So the water tower in Port Dover, that's driven by the new housing development that goes up in Dover. So they get that rate customer and the DC side of things, or is the rate customer taking the entire hit for that $2 million water tower? How does that work out? Do you know what I mean?
Through the mayor to Councillor. Pardon? Yeah. As long as for example, that project, if it's been identified in the development charge study, we will be collecting development charges that the developers will be paying for for that project, part of that project. And then the residents, because of the new subdivision, they'll be paying the water and sewer rates. But the actual development charges are paid by the developer. Does that answer is that what you were looking for?
I think so. Like we'll know more when we get that study and see how everything joins together. I guess like another thing we could look at too would be the Local Improvement Act. Could we not to do certain things for certain areas in the capital side of things?
We haven't used the local improvement for quite a while, and I would have to look into it a little bit more to answer your question better. However, in meeting with, 4 times a year I meet with the regional and single tier treasurers group, and these are treasurers from Hamilton, City of Toronto, and every once in a while we talk about issues, and this actually came up last Friday, and there's very few municipalities that use local levies, and I can't tell you the top 10 reasons why at this point, but that's a sure sign that perhaps it's not a popular option.
Kathy, if you can continue, please.
I believe James had dealt with most of it on the last
Yes.
slide. I just wanted to bring to council's attention that the middle column, the 6.1 million, again, I just want to reiterate what James has said, that is the amount that we've estimated would be the reserve fund balances. These are for capital replacement and reserves and reserve funds only. And that is the dollar amount that we had predicted or estimated to be once we implemented all the recommendations that we had included in the report in July. And when we took that report, and when we've implemented the capital plan, we were pleased to see that we were close when we implement the plan. So there's not a need to come back to you today and say, hey, we need to increase those contributions that we've already proposed increasing back in July. So that was good news for us.
Okay. Anything else to Kathy?
Nope. If council has any further questions, we'd be glad to see if we can clarify them for you.
Well, I think you did a great job there in explaining the picture. I don't have any questions at this moment, but there's going to be lots coming, I can assure you that. Let's go then now to our staff reports. Yes, go ahead.
I'm looking at the available debt, and somewhere along the line, interest rates aren't going to be at 3 or 4%. And would it be better to take some of this and put it into debt rather than into reserves? That's my question. And build up the reserves as time goes.
So that chart is a little, I would say it's a little deceiving. Through legislation, we have the ability to borrow up until that top
I
line.
realize that. I'm not saying we have to go there.
Right. So, so we're all clear on that one. Now, that's a very good question, and there is definitely a balancing act when it comes to contributing to reserves versus debt. And the guidelines that we use is we want to make sure we don't use debt to replace assets. It's part of a 10-year plan to ensure that we're putting the right amount of money away in order to replace existing assets. And then what we do is we use, except for bridges, of course, because that's a little bit of a different bird. But when it comes to new enhancements and new initiatives, then we would initiate debt for that. So those are per our finance policy, which we are going to be looking at. So we will take that question in consideration when we bring back the policy to council, hopefully in the next couple months. And I also wanted to further answer Councillor Height's question about the DC studies. We will have another discussion about DCs in the next 4 weeks when we bring our annual development charges report to council for review.
Anything else? Kathy and James, tab 1, which is 17-39, staff report. Do you wish to go through that to highlight certain things? How do you want to handle that?
I think through the presentation, we've touched on a lot of the
A
highlights
lot of
within
what
the report.
here is
so
here.
Yes, I don't think there's any need to go through it unless council has a specific question about the
Okay,
report.
well, I think what we will do, folks, if you don't mind, I think this would be a good time to have a 15-minute break for coffee stretch. Then we'll come back and see if there's any questions or anything in that 25-page document. Then we'll get on to the budget line by line. Okay, so how about 25 to 11 we come back? Thank you.
On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger along. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger along. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my Southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger along. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my Southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk.
I'd like to get started, folks, please. I'm in no rush. Councillor Wells, tomorrow, I don't want you to be upset if we do a little overtime tomorrow. I don't want to know. Okay, we're back from our break. I want to go to tab 1 in the binder. I'm going to turn tab 1, which of course is FS 1739, much of what has been covered in Kathy's presentation. But I'll ask James if there are certain parts of this, I think there's 26 pages, 25 pages that he would like to bring to our attention, then I'll open just for any questions on any part of it, rather than go through it page by page. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kathy did a very good job with that report. It's very comprehensive. There's a lot of information there. We did add some extra tables from last year. One of them being, if you look at page 11 of 25, there's table 3, and we wanted to put out the project drivers on the reason why we have a close to a $74 million increase on our 10-year capital plan over the capital plan that we presented last year. And you can see more than 50% of it is because of the water supply and interconnections project that we've already talked about. So I wanted to point that out. It's a good summary of the project drivers. The other thing that I would like to point out is with the, there's a summary, a bit of a flow of the reserve contributions starting on page 16. You can see originally we had $17 million in reserve contributions, and then with the recommended annual increase plus the 1.1 million from the famous July report, that brings us, if you look at page 19, brings our annual reserve contribution for, and this is just for capital replacement reserves, to 18.5 million. And the 2016, the last audited financial statements, if you recall, I like to compare that number to our annual amortization number. Our annual amortization is 23.3 million, and that's a good temperature check on what you need to put away every year to replace your assets. So you can see we're about almost $5 million short, and like the mayor suggested, we will be working on this over a long period of time in order to get that in line with our annual amortization. And just to let you know, other municipalities do strive for the same thing. This is a very common check and balance to ensure that we are putting enough money away to replace our assets.
Thank you very much. If there are any questions from council to our finance department on this report, we'll entertain them at this time. Councillor Brunton.
Thank you. I have this report. I guess somebody put it on our desk with the things that you've cut. And I just quickly looked through it here, and some of the big ticket items are in the Cedar Street well field, Chapel Street wells, Northeast well field, but they're all in the millions. And are they removed because of the integration we're going to look at? Is that why they were removed? Or have they been just shoved down the line? How have you done that?
Through the chair, or through the mayor to council, yes, the projects have been removed because based on the implementation of the integrated sustainable master plan, those projects will not be required.
Oh, good news. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Geisens, please. I think I know, but we have Mr. Cridlin, and he knows for sure. He's on page 11 in the report.
Through the chair to Councillor Geisens, the additional change rooms came up for a number of reasons. First of all, some of our present arenas, changing rooms are tight. There's not enough space now. Looking forward, there are some changes coming to the hockey associations with the, I think it's the age six group where they have to go with half ice. With that, we could have an ice team on both sides, which means we would need more dressing rooms at the same time the ice is going on. There's also a concern with our, I'll call it the girls' hockey. Presently, girls that play on male-dominated teams have to go to another dressing room, come back. It's kind of isolation in that part of the team. There's that aspect. There's also, with the new rules coming down and with the transgender, things like that, where we're going to need more change rooms to accommodate different players. So looking at this, it was something that's coming down the pipe, and staff threw it in to let councillors know that moving forward, we don't have we're thinking almost every arena will need additional change rooms. However, until we get more information with numbers, we're not sure where we'd start, but it is a concern we see, and money will need to put in the budget to address this very shortly down the road. Through the chair to Councillor Geisens, yes, in some cases, if additional change rooms can be built inside the existing facility, we'll definitely do that, but as most of our arenas are built such, they're packed full now, so these will be on the sides and that sort of thing, additional.
Need your microphone, Councillor Geisens. Sorry to interrupt you.
Is this happening this year or over the next 4 or 5 years, or whatever what is the thinking, I guess?
Through the chair, as we go through the 10-year forecast, I believe they're 2 or 3 years out before we recommend starting, and there's a series of 5 years, so it's over the next 10 years. That it's not all this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Bratton.
Just a question through you to Lee. Lee, what happened with the Causeway Bridge that bumped that up?
Through the mayor to council, the Causeway Bridge, it's substantially increased in price to do that for a variety of different reasons, and as such, it was felt that it would be difficult to afford to do it in the next few years, and that's why it had been bumped out.
I guess my question is, it went from, 1.8 to 6.5, like, is that because of, like,
There's a huge variety of items that played into it. One of them that is probably the most difficult that's included, that has resulted in the huge increase in price, is the cost for construction, for them to be able to maintain access across the bridge at all times during construction, because there is no other way to get to Long Point. We have to ensure that we maintain two-way traffic, i.e. one direction at a time, but still we have to maintain two-way traffic during construction. In order to implement things like cycling lanes and make it wider, there's going to be some significant retaining walls, et cetera, required in order to make this. And to address some of the sensitive environmental features, we also will be having to expand the span of the bridge. It's going to have to be bigger in order to accommodate all of these different requirements.
could you look at, like, you're saying the span isn't adequate now?
Correct, the span is going to have to have a bigger span.
Is there a possibility of like a multi-plate and a Bailey Bridge there? Have you looked at all that? Or?
Yes, yep, we've certainly looked at all of that through the class environmental assessment.
And it's still up in that figure?
Yes.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, I was right. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. James?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out to everybody, and also anyone who's watching on television or the World Wide Web, that we have just distributed the list of projects that SLT and the departments went through with a list of deletions and deferrals and other items. So that is at your fingertips to look through, and this is something that going forward we will be including in our budget packages on an annual basis. I think it's a good idea to include that. So,
Thank you. Shall we move to tab 2? As we go through these pages, yes, no rush. Yep, go ahead.
When we are actually doing the budget that is involving where these cuts were made, will we be at that time saying, this is the budget that was requested, but it has been cut already or whatever, so we know? I mean, it's all right today. I might not have this paper because people know by now I'm old and I can't remember. But I think it's fair that we should all know we have a budget book, and in that budget book it says this is what they are requesting. So if I'm looking at it and thinking, well, I want to cut, I'd like to know at that time when we're on that page that we've already cut, or senior staff has already cut so much out of that budget already. Just as a quick update,
Yeah, good question.
through you, Mr. Mayor, the list in front of you is a list that we use as we're cutting the projects or moving them around per se. As far as having while we're going through the budget book and putting a little subtotal of things that we've cut, we haven't thought about doing that, but perhaps that's something we can consider for another day.
all I'm saying is when the senior management presents his or her budget, that they would say, senior staff has already cut $11 million out of my budget. That's all I'm asking. So that we know that when we are looking for cuts, that already senior management has gone through it and cut $11 million. That's all I'm asking.
Well, our entire GM team is present and hearing those words, and certainly when it comes to our turn to speak, we can lead off with that. The data is on the full scat paper that was distributed, so we can certainly accommodate that. Councillor?
Thank you. Well, I think it's important that the community know that this department has already cut X number of dollars by themselves without council cutting before we start. So we're treating everybody fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton?
Yeah, Mayor Luke, I'm on 2-1 already.
I'm just about ready to get started there on 2-1, so let's go to tab 2, please, and we'll get started on page 2-1, which is the summary of where it makes up our roughly $38 million capital budget. Go ahead, Councillor Brunton.
Well, I'm just, and I'm go across the very top line, and I want to make sure I understand this. We're going to borrow $27 million from reserve and reserve funds, correct? James?
Your question is, are we going to take it out of reserves?
Well, yeah, but let me finish. That's what it says in this summary, I guess we'll call it, okay?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, Councillor
Okay,
Brunton,
here's the next part of my question.
Yeah.
But there are no reserves in a large portion of that, from what I understand, correct?
Yes, you are correct. So,
Okay, so that'll be additional borrowing?
I really hate saying this, but it depends.
Well, it's 27 million. Maybe
Yeah.
you got some change in your pocket. I don't know.
Right. So with our funding policy, if it's a replacement of an asset, we fund it from a reserve. If at that point we do not have the cash on hand to fund that project, Similar to what we did in 2016, we would bring a report to council and say, we have cash flow issues, we need to use debt to pay for some of these. However, with our new plan to increase funding, if it's approved in January, it will mitigate that. And also, as mentioned, it takes time to complete these projects, and we can't do the debt until the projects are completed. You add all those variables together, and that's why we have a staff member who monitors our cash flow on a regular basis. And if we anticipate a cash flow issue, then we will look at issuing debt.
Well, my bottom line is, there's 27 million there, and I don't believe we have 27 million in our reserves, so someplace along the line, there's going to be some borrowing. And if I looked at all the projects, it stacks up that way. I guess unless Councillor Wells' Santa Claus comes, we're going to be borrowing money. Thank you.
Anything else on 2-1, the summary page? Remember, if I want to keep this going, if I'm moving too quickly, interrupt me. Remember, at the end and the conclusion tomorrow of this budget session, if there's something you want to revisit, that opportunity will certainly be there. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to rush, but I do want to try to keep things moving along. Let's go to page 2-2, and we'll start going through this page by page. Councillor Height on 2-2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up, you'll see the printer, copier, scanner, fax combo replacement of $11,000. All through this thing, you'll see that PWS later in the page, $8,000 photocopier. Is there no summary of all of these little photocopiers and printers so that maybe staff could look at leasing that equipment as opposed to actually purchasing it?
James?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a very good question. As we evolve with our budget process, we do notice items that we can look into and improve upon. There's different schools of thought on virtually anything that you budget for, whether you put it all together or you spread it out amongst the departments and those departments look after it. The printers is a very good example of that. I've seen it done both ways, and I believe we will be looking into the options of putting it all together and maybe in a program, like a replacement program, like what we do with other items, or maybe another avenue. But that's something that we need to discuss with Yakov's area and come up with a solution.
Okay, and for this type of equipment, what's the